I got cheated at my own wedding, she whispered. Pay me $7,490, or I'll marry your rich brother. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The day I dreamed about since I first met Sienna, the woman who had stolen my heart with her laughter, her charm, and the way she made even the simplest moments feel special. Standing at the altar, surrounded by family, friends, and the kind of expensive decor that made my bank account wince, I thought I had everything I ever wanted. The ceremony had been perfect so far. The venue was a grand estate, the kind you see in those luxury wedding magazines, all polished marble and chandeliers that cost more than a year's rent. Sienna had insisted on the best of everything. Designer floral arrangements, a string quartet, a 5-course meal, and I, eager to make her happy, had agreed to it all. Because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You give them the world. I remember standing there, heart pounding, hands slightly clammy despite my confidence. Sienna stood across from me, breathtaking in a lace gown that hugged her body perfectly. Her makeup was flawless, her hair styled in soft waves, and when she smiled it was enough to make any man weak in the knees. Then, just as the officiant was about to start, she leaned in close enough that only I could hear what she said. You have to pay me your $749 monthly salary, or I will marry your handsome rich brother. I thought I misheard her. The words didn't make sense. The sentence was clear, the intent unmistakable, but my brain refused to process it. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe she was nervous and saying nonsense to keep herself from breaking down in tears. But when I pulled back and looked at her, I saw none of that. No hesitation, no nervous giggle. No indication that this was anything but cold, calculated reality. I stared at her, my chest tightening as my heartbeat slammed in my ears. She was serious. She wanted my entire paycheck every month as a condition of this marriage. And if I didn't agree, she had a backup plan, my own brother, Lucas. He was standing there in the front row, looking effortlessly put together as always, taller than me, lean, well-dressed, and annoyingly charismatic. The kind of guy who never had to try too hard. He had always been the golden child of the family, the one who got away with everything, the one my parents constantly compared me to. If he failed, it was a learning experience. If I failed, it was disappointing. I had spent my whole life trying to step out of his shadow, trying to prove I was just as capable, just as worthy of attention. And now, here was my bride, my supposed soulmate, using him as leverage against me. For a split second, I felt sick, not just with anger, not just with betrayal, but with the sheer absurdity of it all. Was I really standing at my own wedding being blackmailed? Was this really happening? I forced myself to breathe, to stay calm. My first instinct was to lash out, to demand an explanation, to tell her that she was out of her mind. But I didn't, not yet, because the last thing I wanted was to make a scene, to give her the satisfaction of seeing me crack in front of everyone. Instead, I straightened my shoulders and looked her dead in the eye. No, I said, one word, firm, unshaken. Sienna blinked, just once. Then, in the most graceful, fluid movement I'd ever seen, she turned her head toward Lucas. Lucas, she said sweetly, her voice carrying through the hushed room. I think I made a mistake. I should be marrying you. The crowd gasped. A murmur rippled through the room like a wave crashing against the shore. I expected Lucas to be shocked, to laugh it off, to shake his head and say, "Nice try, Sienna," but he didn't. He smiled like he'd been waiting for this moment all along. Without a moment's hesitation, he took a step forward, and with that single step, my world shifted. This wasn't just about Sienna. This wasn't some impulsive last-minute decision. This had been planned. I looked at my parents, expecting outrage, expecting them to defend me, to shut this insanity down. Instead, my mother was dabbing at imaginary tears, whispering something to my father. My father, he was nodding, approving. I felt my pulse roar in my ears as realization set in. They were fine with this. More than fine, they were happy about it. Lucas had always been their golden boy, their pride and joy. If they had a choice between their successful, charming eldest son and the man standing at the altar, the one they never quite deemed good enough, they were always going to choose him. I was nothing more than a placeholder until a better option came along. A bitter laugh nearly escaped my throat, but I swallowed it down. I had spent years, my whole life even, proving I was worthy, proving I was enough. And for what? To be tossed aside at my own wedding like a disposable napkin? I took a step back, then another. The officiant was speechless, the guests confused, the air thick with tension, waiting for me to react, to explode. But I didn't give them the satisfaction. I turned and, without another word, I walked away, out of the venue, out of their lives, out of the trap they had set for me. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I was done. I kept walking. I didn't know where I was going, and I didn't care. All I knew was that I had to get out of there, away from them. away from the suffocating weight of betrayal pressing against my chest. My wedding, and yet it felt like some twisted nightmare playing out in slow motion. I could still hear the gasps of the guests, feel the burning stares of the people I had trusted, the ones I had let into my life. But most of all, I could hear her voice, Sienna's voice, smooth and confident, calling out to Lucas like she had just decided to change dinner reservations instead of abandoning her groom at the altar. "Lucas, I think I made a mistake. I should be marrying you." That sentence kept repeating in my head like a broken record that wouldn't stop skipping. And the worst part? Lucas hadn't even hesitated. I had expected shock, awkward laughter, maybe even an attempt to defuse the situation. Instead, he had stepped forward like he had been waiting for that moment his entire life. Because he had. That realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't some last-minute crisis of conscience on Sienna's part. This was a setup. How long had they planned this? How long had they been waiting for the moment to drop this bomb on me? Was it before the engagement? After? Had my parents known all along, or had they just gone along with it the moment Lucas agreed? I clenched my fists. I could feel the nails digging into my palms, grounding me in a way that the rest of my body refused to. For a brief second, I considered turning back, not to beg, never that, but to demand answers, to get in Lucas's face, to grab Sienna by the wrist and make her tell me exactly when she had decided that I was just a stepping stone toward the life she really wanted. But then I pictured the smirk on Lucas's face, the way he had stepped forward with that easy confidence, as if he had always known he was the better option. The way my mother had dabbed at her eyes, not from sadness but from joy. The way my father had nodded in approval, like this was just another smart business decision. And I knew I would never get the answers I wanted because none of them saw me as someone worth answering to. I kept walking. The streets were quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos I had left behind. A wedding venue filled with gasping guests, stunned silence, and a bride who had thrown her own vows out the window like they meant nothing. Because they hadn't. Sienna had never meant them, and Lucas had never once been on my side. I should have known. The signs had been there, scattered like puzzle pieces I had refused to put together. The way Sienna would always light up when Lucas was around. The way my parents always seemed warmer whenever Lucas was the one talking. The way I had always been just a little bit less, a little bit second place, even when it came to my own life. I had ignored it, chosen to believe that love and family meant something more. That was my mistake. I stopped at a quiet cafe on the corner of the street, the kind of place that always smelled like freshly brewed coffee and warm bread. The kind of place where, for a few minutes, you could pretend the world outside didn't exist. I needed that. I stepped inside, ordered something I didn't even register what, and found a seat in the back, away from the windows, away from anyone who might recognize me. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. It buzzed again. I didn't even need to check the screen to know who it was. I stared at the black surface of my coffee, my reflection distorted in the ripples. How many times had I imagined this day? Not like this, of course. In my version, Sienna and I would be laughing, hands intertwined, celebrating the start of our new life. Lucas would be there, of course, because why wouldn't he be? He was my brother. He was supposed to be family. My parents would be proud, my friends would be cheering, and I would finally feel like I belonged. But that was never going to happen. Not then, not now, not ever. The phone buzzed again, longer this time, a call. I let it ring. Eventually, curiosity got the best of me. I pulled the phone out of my pocket and glanced at the screen. Sienna. My grip tightened around the device. My instinct was to toss it across the room, let it shatter into as many pieces as she had left my pride in. But instead, I just watched it ring until it stopped. A few seconds later, a message appeared. "Come back, please," I exhaled. A humorless chuckle escaped before I could stop it. She thought I would come back? She thought I was still that guy. The one who would swallow his pride, forgive the unforgivable, and let himself be played one more time? She didn't know me at all. The phone buzzed again. Another message. "It's not what you think. Just come back. I'll explain everything." Explain? What was there to explain? Had she momentarily lost her mind? Had she been possessed at the altar, spouting nonsense she didn't mean? Had she been pressured into making the worst decision of her life? No. Sienna didn't make mistakes. She made choices, calculated, strategic choices. And she had chosen Lucas. I took one last sip of my coffee, letting the bitterness settle in my mouth before I set the cup down and got up. I wasn't going back. There was nothing left for me there. But for some reason, I still couldn't bring myself to block her number. Not yet. I didn't go back, not to the venue, not to my family, not to the mess I had left behind. I walked out of that wedding and never looked back. And yet, the weight of it clung to me like a second skin. It didn't matter how far I walked or how many blocks I put between myself and the disaster. I could still hear Sienna's voice, still see the smug look on Lucas's face, still feel the silent approval radiating from my parents. They had all played their parts so perfectly. I had been the only fool in the room. I kept moving, letting my feet take me wherever they wanted. My tuxedo jacket felt suffocating, so I pulled it off and tossed it onto a bench, not caring who picked it up. The tie came next, yanked loose and stuffed into my pocket. My head was spinning, my chest tight. It was as if my body hadn't quite caught up to the fact that it was all over, that I wasn't married, that the woman I loved had sold me out for something shinier, that my own brother had stepped into my place without a second thought. I walked for hours. I ignored the buzzing in my pocket. Sienna was still trying to reach me, so was my mother. I stopped at a convenience store, grabbed a bottle of water and caught a glimpse of myself in the reflection of the glass doors. I barely recognized the man staring back, the perfectly groomed hair now slightly disheveled, the crisp white dress shirt wrinkled, the exhaustion in my eyes so obvious it looked like I hadn't slept in days. I had gone to that wedding expecting a celebration. I had walked out of it looking like I had just survived a war. And in a way, I had. After paying for the water, I stepped outside, leaning against the side of the building. A couple walked past me, hand in hand, laughing about something private between them. A pang of something sharp twisted in my gut. That was supposed to be me. I was supposed to be somewhere else right now, probably on a dance floor, holding my wife close, whispering promises about our future together. I was supposed to be smiling, surrounded by friends and family, celebrating the start of something beautiful. Instead, I was here, alone. It was funny, in a cruel way. I had spent so much of my life trying to prove myself, trying to show my parents I was just as worthy as Lucas, trying to show Sienna that I could be everything she ever wanted, trying to build something real, something stable, something that mattered. And in the end, none of it had mattered at all. I laughed, a low, humorless sound that probably made me look slightly unhinged to the people passing by. But I didn't care, because what else was there to do but laugh? What else was left when everything had already fallen apart? My phone buzzed again. I finally pulled it out of my pocket, half expecting to see another message from Sienna, some weak excuse or attempt to pull me back in. But it wasn't her this time. It was Lucas. I stared at the screen for a long moment, debating whether or not to answer. And then, before I could talk myself out of it, I pressed accept. For a second there was silence. Then his voice calm and casual as if nothing had happened. "Brother, where did you run off to?" I exhaled slowly, gripping the phone tighter. "What do you want, Lucas? You disappeared before the real party started. Thought you'd at least stick around to see how it all played out." The smugness in his voice was unbearable. He was enjoying this. He wanted me to react, to yell, to curse his name. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. I had better things to do, I said. Lucas chuckled. "Come on, don't be like that. You always take things so personally. It's just business, you know? Business," I repeated, barely keeping my temper in check. "Is that what you call stealing my fiancée at the altar? Look, Sienna made her choice. I didn't force her. And let's be honest, did you really think she was going to settle for you when she could have more?" There it was, the truth laid out in the open. I had never been enough. Not for my parents, not for Sienna, not even in my own brother's eyes. "So what now?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. "You think you're going to live happily ever after?" Lucas was silent for a beat too long. "Well, we'll see, won't we?" I smirked. "Yeah, we will." Then without another word I hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone in my hand, resisting the urge to throw it into the street and watch it shatter. Lucas had won for now. But the thing about people like Lucas and Sienna, they always thought they were invincible. They always thought they were too smart, too charming, too untouchable to face consequences. They were wrong. I wasn't going to be the fool who sat back and let them enjoy the spoils of their betrayal. They had made their move. Now it was my turn. I stood up, shoved my phone back into my pocket, and started walking again, this time with purpose. I didn't know exactly what my next step was going to be, but I did know one thing for certain. I was done being the guy everyone underestimated. I was halfway through a bottle of whiskey when my phone started buzzing again. It had been a couple of hours since I left the wedding, and by now the shock had begun to fade, replaced by something colder, something sharper. I had spent my entire life believing in love, in family, in loyalty. Tonight had shattered those illusions into a million irreparable pieces. The wedding venue, the guests, my brother, my parents, Sienna, all of it felt like a bad dream I had walked away from. I wasn't even sure where I was anymore. Some dive bar tucked away in a quiet corner of the city, dimly lit, The kind of place where no one asked questions. A perfect place for someone who didn't want to be found. And yet, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Sienna. She had called over a dozen times already. At first, I ignored it. Then I muted it. Then I put it face down on the bar, hoping that if I didn't see it, I could pretend it wasn't happening. But the buzzing continued, insistent and frantic, vibrating against the wooden surface like an alarm I couldn't shut off. I sighed, picking it up. And for the first time that night, I hesitated. What was I expecting? An apology? An excuse? Another insult disguised as an explanation? She had humiliated me in front of everyone. She had whispered those poison-laced words into my ear and, without missing a beat, had replaced me with my own brother like I was nothing. So why was she calling? I stared at her name flashing on the screen, my thumb hovering over the decline button. But something about the sheer desperation of her repeated calls made me pause. I exhaled sharply, then finally swiped to answer. For a second there was silence, just the sound of shallow, uneven breathing. Then her voice, panicked, frantic, nothing like the woman who had smirked at me hours earlier. "You have to come back," she gasped. I leaned back in my seat, swirling the whiskey in my glass. "Why would I do that?" "Please, I swear, just come back. You don't understand. Something went wrong." Something about the raw fear in her voice gave me pause. I had expected arrogance, maybe even a half-hearted attempt to manipulate me into feeling sorry for her. But this was something else. "What went wrong, Sienna?" I asked, keeping my voice calm, controlled. She didn't answer right away. In the background, I could hear chaos, voices raised in anger, guests murmuring in confusion, the unmistakable sound of something shattering. Then she whispered, "Lucas is gone." I sat up a little straighter. "Gone?" "He left. He just walked out. He was supposed to sign the papers, and then he just disappeared. He's not answering his phone, and I don't know what to do." I closed my eyes, letting the moment sink in. I should have felt something, anger, satisfaction, maybe even the faintest hint of schadenfreude. But all I felt was a slow, dull realization settling over me like a heavy blanket. Lucas had done exactly what I should have expected him to do. He had left her, just like she had left me. "Well," I said finally, taking another sip of my drink, "looks like you made a bad bet." "Don't do this," she pleaded. "I need you. Please, just come back. We need to fix this. There's no we anymore, Sienna." She made a strangled noise, something between frustration and despair. "You don't get it. My parents, your parents, everyone is watching. I can't just be left like this. You have to come back." And there it was, the real reason behind her desperation. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about love. It was about saving face. She had built this perfect, polished image of herself, the bride in the designer dress, the woman who had flawlessly transitioned from one brother to the next like she was trading in an old car for a newer model. And now, with Lucas gone, she was standing there, exposed, humiliated, alone. For the first time that night, I smiled, a slow, dark smile that I knew she could hear in my voice when I finally responded. "Enjoy the wedding, Sienna. Hope you like standing at the altar all by yourself." Then I hung up. I set my phone down, exhaling as I stared at the ice melting in my glass. So that was it. Lucas had left. Sienna had lost. And for the first time all night, I felt something dangerously close to peace. But as I finished my drink, a thought crept into my mind. Lucas walking away didn't make sense. He wasn't the type to back out of a deal unless something better was waiting for him. So where had he gone? And what the hell was he planning next? I should have gone home. I should have turned my phone off, gotten some sleep, and let the whole mess unravel without me. But something gnawed at me, something about the way Sienna had sounded. It wasn't just panic, it was fear. And if there was one thing I knew about Lucas, it was that he didn't inspire fear in women, not the way a normal man would. He wasn't violent, he wasn't reckless. No, Lucas was something much worse. He was calculated, which meant that if he left, he had a reason. I tossed a few bills on the bar, grabbed my jacket and walked out into the night, my head still buzzing from the whiskey. I hailed a cab, gave the driver the name of the venue, and spent the entire ride trying to convince myself that I didn't care, that I wasn't going back because I still had feelings for Sienna, that I wasn't doing this because deep down I wanted her to tell me I'd been the right choice all along. I was going back because I wanted to see the wreckage. And when I stepped out of the car, that's exactly what I found. The once grand wedding hall, the one I had paid for, now looked like the aftermath of a storm. Guests were scattered in clusters, whispering behind their hands, some already filing out the front doors like they wanted to escape before the next disaster hit. Inside, the flowers that had once adorned the tables were now crushed on the floor, trampled in the chaos. A glass had been knocked over near the buffet, red wine bleeding across the expensive white tablecloths like an omen. At the center of it all was Sienna. She stood near the altar, still in her pristine white dress, but the confidence, the arrogance that had once radiated off her was gone. She looked abandoned. And the best part? My parents stood beside her. Their perfect son, their golden boy, had humiliated them all. I stepped forward, and every head in the room turned toward me. Sienna's eyes locked onto mine, wide, desperate. She rushed toward me, grasping my arm before I could stop her. "Thank God you're here," she whispered. I just stared at her. "Where is he?" Her breath hitched. I don't know. He just walked out right before we were supposed to sign the marriage certificate. He didn't say a word. He just left. I almost laughed. Lucas, that bastard. He had played her like a game of chess. He had let her humiliate me, let her believe she had won, let our parents eat up every second of their grand betrayal. And then he had walked away. Because why settle for her when he could have something better? I pulled my arm free. "And you thought I would come back to clean up the mess?" She flinched. "I know. I didn't know who else to call." I glanced around the room, making sure everyone could hear me. "Why don't you ask my parents?" I gestured toward them. After all, they were perfectly fine with switching out their sons for the highest bidder. "Maybe they can find you a third option." My mother gasped. My father's expression darkened. But before either of them could speak, a new voice cut through the silence. "Lucas isn't coming back." We all turned. At the back of the room stood a woman, tall, elegant, and furious. I had never seen her before, but the second Sienna went pale, I knew exactly who she was. Lucas's real fiancée. The one Sienna had never known about. The woman stormed forward, her heels clicking against the floor with each step, her face set in a cold mask of fury. "You think Lucas wanted to marry you?" She sneered at Sienna. "You were a joke to him, a distraction. The second he got what he wanted, he left." Just like that. Sienna's lips parted, but no sound came out. I turned to my parents, wanting to see their reaction to their perfect son's latest disaster. They looked horrified, because it wasn't just about Lucas leaving, it was about their reputation. They had orchestrated this wedding, had stood behind Lucas, had betrayed their own son for a son-in-law who had just publicly humiliated them all. And I was the only one still standing, the only one who hadn't been played. The silence stretched between us all, thick with tension, with realization, with defeat. Then, finally, I exhaled, stepped back, and said the only thing that made sense. "Looks like the wedding's over." And then I walked away again, this time for good. I was almost out the door when I heard my mother's voice behind me. "Wait!" I didn't. I had already walked away from this mess once. I had already been humiliated, cast aside, used as a stepping stone for my brother's ambitions and Sienna's greed. There was nothing left for me here, no apology, no explanation, no excuse that would undo the betrayal I had endured. But then I heard my father's voice, low and unsteady. "We were wrong." That made me stop, not because I wanted to hear them out, but because in all my years, I had never once heard my father admit he was wrong. Not about business, not about family, and certainly not about Lucas. I turned around slowly, hands in my pockets, my expression unreadable. What was that? My father, the man who had spent my entire life looking at me like I was second best, exhaled deeply. His face, usually hard and composed, was tight with discomfort. My mother, standing next to him, dabbed at the corner of her eye with a silk handkerchief. Whether it was genuine or just for show, I didn't care. "We made a mistake," he repeated, glancing toward the stunned crowd as if the weight of what had just happened was finally sinking in. I gave him a slow, humorless nod. "Yeah, you did." The words felt good. Sienna stood between them, her hands trembling at her sides. I could see it now, the cracks forming in her perfect exterior, the realization setting in that she had played the wrong game and lost spectacularly. She had been so sure of herself, so convinced she could manipulate her way into my family's wealth. And for a moment it had worked, until Lucas had pulled the ultimate con. He had never intended to marry her. The truth was still settling over everyone like a thick fog. The guests, once whispering in scandalous delight, now stared in open horror at the sheer scale of the disaster unfolding before them. And standing at the very center of it all was Sienna, abandoned at the altar for the second time in a single night. She looked at me then, a mix of shame, desperation, and something dangerously close to regret. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I swear I didn't know about his fiancé. I tilted my head. "And I'm supposed to feel sorry for you?" She flinched. I stepped closer, just enough that only she could hear me. "You thought you were playing him, but Lucas was playing you." And you didn't even see it coming. She swallowed hard, blinking rapidly as if trying to push back the tears welling in her eyes. I never meant to hurt you, she whispered. I almost laughed. You whispered at the altar that if I didn't give you my salary, you'd marry my brother instead, I said, my voice calm, deliberate. You didn't just mean to hurt me, Sienna. You planned it. She shook her head quickly. I thought it would be different. You thought Lucas would stay, I cut her off. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You don't care about me, you never did. But him leaving, that wasn't in your script. She bit her lip, her hands curling into fists. He told me we'd be together. He told me. Lucas tells a lot of people a lot of things. A choked sound escaped her, half a sob, half a bitter laugh. I could see it now, the storm raging inside her, the perfect life she had envisioned slipping through her fingers. And the best part? She had no one to blame but herself. I turned my attention back to my parents, who were still standing there, still trying to salvage whatever dignity they had left. So, I said, shifting my weight, what happens now? My mother cleared her throat delicately. We will find a way to fix this. Fix what? I asked. Your golden son just humiliated you in front of everyone. He abandoned the bride you wanted for him, and now the whole city is going to be talking about this disaster for weeks. So, tell me, Mom, what exactly do you plan on fixing? She opened her mouth, then closed it, looking to my father as if hoping he had an answer. He didn't, because there wasn't one. This was their mess, and for the first time, they had to sit in it. I could have stayed. I could have watched them scramble, watched Sienna try to pick up the pieces of her broken fairy tale, but I had wasted enough time on people who had proven they weren't worth it. So I gave my parents one last look, then turned to Sienna. Good luck with that wedding, I said, voice dripping with mock sympathy. I hear third time's the charm. Then, without waiting for a response, I walked out the door. And this time, I didn't look back. I walked away from that disaster, but the echoes of it followed me. The gasps, the murmurs, the weight of Sienna's stunned silence, my mother's helpless attempts to salvage the wreckage, my father's cold acceptance of his own humiliation. It all played in my head like a badly edited film. But the one thing that stuck with me the most? The truth. Lucas had never intended to marry Sienna. That part wasn't even a surprise. No, the real surprise was that my so-called golden brother had been engaged the entire time to a woman none of us even knew about. And Sienna? She had been a side game, a backup plan, a spare. That thought alone should have made me feel better, should have given me the satisfaction of knowing that Sienna's betrayal had come full circle, that she had gotten exactly what she deserved. But instead, I just felt numb, because none of it should have happened in the first place. I should have seen it coming. Should have known that my parents would pick Lucas over me, should have recognized that Sienna had been playing a different game all along. But I didn't. And that stung. I made it halfway down the street when my phone buzzed in my pocket again. I glanced at it, fully expecting yet another desperate call from Sienna, or worse, my mother trying to do damage control. But it wasn't either of them. It was her, Lucas's secret fiancée, the woman who had stormed into the wedding and shattered the last piece of Sienna's illusion. I debated ignoring it, but something about her walking into that room with more rage than I had ever seen in my life made me press accept. I was hoping you'd answer, she said immediately. I leaned against a street lamp, my fingers tightening around the phone. And why is that? Because you're the only one who got played just as badly as I did. I exhaled sharply. You knew about me, didn't you? Not at first, she admitted. But then I started noticing things. Lucas disappearing for days at a time, taking calls he didn't want me to hear, and then the receipts. Receipts, hotel bookings, restaurant bills, jewelry purchases I never got. It didn't take me long to figure out there was someone else. I just didn't know it was your fiancé until about a week ago. I rubbed a hand over my face. A week ago? Yeah. That's when I found out they were planning to replace you at the altar. I froze. Wait, you heard me. You're saying Lucas knew about this weeks before the wedding? Of course he did. Why do you think he played along? She let out a bitter laugh. Lucas never does anything unless it benefits him. I stared at the pavement, my stomach twisting. Lucas hadn't just taken advantage of an opportunity when Sienna called out to him at the altar. He had known it was going to happen. This wasn't just a last-minute betrayal, it had been planned. The realization settled over me like a heavy weight. How long have you been engaged to him? I asked, my voice quieter now. Almost 2 years, she said, and something in her voice cracked. 2 years, and he let me walk into that room thinking we had a future. Let me stand there knowing that I was about to watch him marry someone else. She went silent for a moment. I almost didn't go, she admitted. But then I thought, why should he get to control the story? Why should he get to humiliate me in private while pretending he's the perfect son in public? I exhaled slowly. So you made sure everyone knew the truth? Damn right I did. For the first time that night, I felt something other than anger, respect. Because I had walked away, but she had burned everything down on her way out. So what now? I asked. She sighed. Now? Now I make sure he pays. You? I looked around at the city lights, the streets stretching endlessly in both directions. Now I move on. Just like that? Just like that, she hummed. Wish I could do the same. Why can't you? Because unlike you, I don't just want to walk away. I want him to feel what I felt. I want him to lose everything the way I did. And trust me, Lucas has a lot more to lose than you. I almost smiled. Sounds like you've got a plan. Oh, I do. Good luck then. She hesitated. You too. Then she hung up. I slid my phone back into my pocket and stood there for a moment, breathing in the cool night air. Lucas had made his move. Sienna had made hers. Now it was my turn. I had wasted enough time trying to prove myself to people who didn't deserve it. It was time to prove something else, that I didn't need any of them, that I would be just fine on my own, and that no one, not Sienna, not Lucas, not even my parents, was ever going to use me again. I had walked away from that disaster of a wedding, but the weight of it still clung to me like a second skin. The humiliation, the betrayal, the sheer absurdity of the whole situation. It wasn't something I could just shake off. I had spent years thinking I was building something real. I had poured everything into my relationship with Sienna, trusting her, believing we had a future, and in the end, all I had been was a stepping stone to a life she thought she deserved more than me. And Lucas, he had taken what was mine just because he could, just because he knew he could get away with it. But now, for the first time, he had lost. And Sienna had lost too. She just didn't want to accept it yet. That became obvious when my phone buzzed again, her name flashing across the screen. I almost ignored it, almost. But something in me wanted to hear what she had to say. So I picked up. You have 10 seconds before I hang up. She let out a shaky breath. Please don't. I need to talk to you. Why? I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. So you can explain how you were just confused? How you didn't mean to destroy everything? Spare me, Sienna. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. Like this. I let out a humorless laugh. So what, you thought you'd marry Lucas and I'd just sit there and smile in the audience? Clap politely as you replaced me at the altar? No, She hesitated, then exhaled. I don't know what I thought, okay? I made a mistake. A mistake? My grip on the phone tightened. You didn't forget to send an email, Sienna. You planned this. You whispered in my ear at the altar that if I didn't give you my salary, you'd marry my brother instead. That's not a mistake. That's who you are. Silence. I could hear her breathing, could feel the weight of her shame through the phone. Then, barely above a whisper, I was scared. I frowned. Of what? Of settling. Of not having the life I always dreamed of. I thought if I was with Lucas, I'd have everything. And now I have nothing. She wasn't lying. Lucas was gone. My parents were humiliated. The future she had built in her head had crumbled before her eyes. And now she wanted a second chance with me. So what? I asked, my voice cold. You want me to come back? To pretend none of this happened? You think I'm that pathetic? No, she said quickly. I want to fix this. You can't. She let out a shaky breath. I know. I rubbed a hand over my face. So why are you calling me, Sienna? Because I lost everything, and you're the only one who ever really cared about me. You're the only person who, her voice cracked. I don't know what to do, okay? I closed my eyes. For a second, just a second, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered. I remembered the way she had smirked when she whispered that ultimatum in my ear. I remembered how she had turned to Lucas without hesitation. I remembered how she had stood there and let my family choose him over me. And suddenly, there was nothing left in me to give her. I know what you should do, Sienna. What? Move on. Like I did. Silence. Then she whispered, Is that really it? Yeah. And then, before she could say anything else, I ended the call. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the city lights, the night air cool against my skin. That was it. That was the last thread. Sienna was gone. Lucas was gone. And I was free. I wasn't going to waste another second on people who had proven they weren't worth it. I turned my phone off, slid it into my pocket, and walked away, this time toward a future that was truly mine. I didn't wake up the next morning feeling different. There was no grand epiphany, no cinematic moment where I stared into the mirror and saw a completely transformed man. No, it was more subtle than that, like the weight I had carried for years had finally started to lift, one feather at a time. For the first time in years, I had no one to answer to but myself. No fiancé expecting me to finance her lavish lifestyle, no brother waiting to one-up me at every turn, no parents hovering in the background measuring my worth against a standard I was never meant to reach. It was just me, and my life, and whatever I chose to do next. I made a decision right then and there. I was done looking back. The first thing I did was block Sienna's number. I had given her the closure she wanted. I had listened to her excuses, let her voice tremble with regret, and then cut her out of my life for good. There was no point in leaving the door open, no point in waiting for her to come crawling back, hoping for one last chance to manipulate me. And Lucas? I knew he'd resurface eventually. People like him always do. They disappear just long enough to let the damage settle, then return with a new angle, a new strategy, a new lie. I wasn't worried about him. If he ever came back, I'd be ready. But my parents, that was a different story. 2 days after the wedding, I got a text from my father. "We need to talk. Come home." I almost laughed at the audacity of it. Come home? As if nothing had happened? As if my entire life hadn't just been turned into a public scandal because of their blind devotion to Lucas? I didn't respond. But later that evening, as I sat in my apartment staring at the untouched dinner in front of me, I realized something. This was my chance to finally set the record straight. So I went. Not as the son desperately seeking their approval, not as the man who had been humiliated at the altar, not as the second-place runner in a race I had never signed up for. I went as me, the man who had walked away from all of it and wasn't coming back. My parents' house was just as I remembered, cold, pristine, lifeless. The kind of home that looked like it belonged in a magazine but never really felt like anyone lived in it. I stepped inside and my mother rushed toward me like she actually cared. "I was so worried about you," she said, reaching for my hand. I pulled back. "Don't." She blinked, stunned, then turned to my father, who sat stiffly in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Why am I here?" I asked, crossing my arms. My father leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "We made a mistake." "Which one?" I asked. "There were so many." His jaw tightened. My mother let out a dramatic sigh, shaking her head. "You're being cruel." "Cruel?" I repeated, laughing under my breath. No, cruel was standing at my own wedding realizing my family had chosen my brother over me. Cruel was watching you smile as Sienna humiliated me. Cruel was letting me believe for years that no matter what I did, I'd never be enough for you. My father shifted in his seat. "That's not true, isn't it?" I shot back. "Tell me something, Dad. If Lucas had gone through with it, if he had actually married Sienna, would you be sitting here telling me you made a mistake? Or would you be celebrating the fact that your better son had secured himself the perfect life?" Silence. And that was my answer. "You didn't regret what you did to me. You regretted that he did it to you." My mother's eyes welled with tears. "We just want things to go back to the way they were." I shook my head. "That's never happening." "So what now?" my father asked, his voice clipped, like he was already preparing to cut me out of the picture. "Now," I exhaled slowly. "Now I live my life without you in it." My mother gasped. "You don't mean that." I looked at her, then at my father. "Yeah, I do." And then for the last time, I walked away. A life that was truly mine, it wasn't easy cutting them off. There were moments when I second-guessed myself. Moments when the weight of being alone pressed down on me harder than I expected. But with each passing day, I realized something. I wasn't alone. I had a career. I had dreams. I had an entire life ahead of me that no longer revolved around proving myself to people who would never see my worth. I traveled. I started investing in things for myself. I met new people, built real connections, ones not based on status, wealth, or obligation. And then, one day, I met someone new. She wasn't like Sienna. She didn't care about my bank account. She didn't play games. She was just real. And for the first time, so was I. I wasn't the man at the altar anymore. I wasn't the son who had spent his life trying to measure up. I wasn't the backup option, the second-place choice, the safety net. I was just me. And that was enough.